There are places so beautiful that they make people wonder whether they truly exist on Earth. From towering mountains and crystal-clear lakes to breathtaking coastlines and remote wilderness, our world is still filled with wonders that surpass imagination. In this journey, we will travel across continents to discover some of the most spectacular landscapes on the planet, where nature has crafted masterpieces that leave millions in awe. Each destination tells its own story, offering unique perspectives, unforgettable experiences, and beauty unlike anywhere else in the world. Join us as we explore the most beautiful places on Earth and see if by the end of this journey you can choose the most beautiful one of them all. Canary Islands, Spain. In the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Africa, this archipelago feels like land lifted from the sea by volcanoes, where black rock, red soil, and blue ocean create a very unusual beauty. One special thing here is its ancient cloud forest, where mist covers the trees all year, moss clings to the trunks, and twisted canopies feel like remains from millions of years ago. In some areas of the archipelago, the ground is so hot that just 3 feet below the surface, temperatures can reach about 752 degrees Fahrenheit, enough to cook food naturally. This place was once a stopping point in the history of ocean trade, creating a community with a unique cultural mix from Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Beyond its overwhelming beauty, this archipelago is proof of nature's creative power, where the brightest life always rises strongly from the ashes of destruction. Bonifacio, France. Bonifacio looks like a town hanging on the edge of the sky, where old houses stand beside white cliffs about 230 feet high and look straight down into the deep blue sea. Those cliffs were formed from countless layers of ancient sea life, then waves carved 33 to 49 feet into their base, making the town above seem almost weightless. A sea inlet nearly 1 mile long cuts deep into the land and creates a sheltered natural harbor, giving this place both dramatic beauty and defensive value for centuries. Because people lived on that fragile edge, they built houses, walls, and 187 steps into the stone, turning the cliff into a fortress, blended with nature. When sunset paints the cliff's orange-pink and salty mist rises from below, Bonifacio appears like a beauty, slowly disappearing under the endless erosion of the sea. Port Campbell National Park, Australia. Port Campbell feels like a stone wall slowly being taken apart by the ocean, where rock stacks up to 164 feet high were once part of an ancient seabed lifted over millions of years. With no land barrier to the south, cold wind and waves strike the coast directly, carving limestone into vertical cliffs, sea caves, and separated rock towers offshore. That beauty once came with danger, because fog, storms, and hidden reefs destroyed more than 700 ships in the 19th century. Along the cliff edge, the coastal road was cut by soldiers after World War I, using picks, shovels, and explosives, turning a scenic journey into a long war memory beside the sea. So when salty mist rises from breaking waves and sunset burns the cliffs red, this place does not feel peaceful, but beautiful, with time, loss, and the endless power of the sea. Ushguli, Georgia. Hovering above a rolling sea of clouds at 7,218 feet, this fairy tale settlement creates a surreal feeling beneath one of the purest and deepest blue skies in the Caucasus. As sunset falls, the summer meadows transform into a glowing landscape where pink evening light spreads across valleys filled with vibrant wildflowers. Rising through that wild scenery are hundreds of stone towers standing 66 to 82 feet tall, built from natural slate since the 9th century without mortar. Connected like a giant mountain fortress, the towers shine with small golden lights from narrow windows, casting a quiet and mysterious glow across the night valley. Hidden deep among moss-covered stone paths are ancient churches, preserving fading frescoes, giving Ushguli a sacred beauty that feels both peaceful and heartbreaking. Thingvellir National Park, Iceland. Thingvellir does not overwhelm people with high mountains or giant waterfalls, but with silent cracks where two continents are still pulling the ground apart. The North American and Eurasian tectonic plates move away from each other by about 1 inch each year, sinking the valley floor more than 131 feet over 10,000 years and leaving deep rock scars on the surface. Meltwater from glaciers passes through volcanic rock for 30 to 100 years, becoming naturally filtered until the blue cracks are clear enough to see about 328 feet deep. On this moving geological foundation, in the year 930, Viking settlers chose outdoor cliffs as a meeting place for Parliament, turning the power of nature into an early political space. That is why Thingvellir is not only beautiful scenery, but a place where Earth time and human history appear together inside one single crack. Tumpak Sewu, Indonesia. Tumpak Sewu is beautiful because it does not fall like one single waterfall, but opens into a white arc around a green canyon nearly 400 feet deep. Water flows from many cracks in the cliff, forming countless thin layers like silk curtains, making the whole gorge look covered by an endless rain. Beneath those streams, moss, ferns, and tropical forest cover the rock walls, creating a strong contrast between soft emerald green and the powerful white of the falls. The thick spray at the bottom keeps the air cool, while sunlight passing through the mist turns into bright beams and small rainbows. From the bottom of the canyon, white streams falling between green cliffs and thick mist make Tumpak Sewu feel like a giant curtain, hiding the heart of the tropical forest. British Columbia, Canada. Stretching along the west coast of North America, this place feels like a natural fortress where the violent ocean crashes into mountains once carved by glaciers into depths of more than 1,968 feet. Its coastline is more than 15,500 miles long, shaped over time by Pacific waves and cold winds into countless cliffs, narrow inlets, and thick layers of mist. In the wet coastal areas, temperate rainforests grow thick and dark, with many ancient trees rising more than 197 feet and covered in moss, like a world left from ancient times. Within only a few dozen miles, high mountains can block moisture, turning lush green forest into dry, semi-desert land. This is also one of the rare places where many grizzly bears and cougars live, reminding visitors that in this wild nature, humans are not always the ones in control. Skarda Lake National Park, Montenegro, and Albania. Between the limestone mountains of the Balkans, Lake Skarda appears as a body of water that never stays still, changing from 143 to 205 square miles between the dry and rainy seasons. Beneath its calm surface are sinkholes nearly 197 feet deep and underground rivers that constantly renew the water, keeping the lake clear and emerald green. That environment has turned this place into a wild world for more than 280 bird species, especially giant pelicans with wingspans nearly 10 feet wide flying across the lake. On the surface, millions of lily pads and waterflowers create a floating maze where long wooden boats move almost without sound. During foggy mornings, the lake reflects the Rocky Mountains and sky so perfectly that the border between land and water disappears, making the whole landscape feel like a silent world floating in the air. Antalya Caves, Turkey. Beneath the dry, rocky mountains of Antalya, water has silently hollowed out the ground for millions of years, creating a deep, dark cave world with giant stone chambers and cold emerald lakes. The farther you move inside, the stranger the landscape becomes, as vast underground rivers connect with lakes more than 49 feet deep, making some cave sections reachable only by boat. In that darkness, mineral-rich drops of water fell for ages and formed stalactites, stalagmites, and stone columns up to 33 feet high. Sharp stone points cover the cave ceiling like the teeth of a giant creature, but behind narrow cracks, huge spaces suddenly open like a hidden cathedral beneath the earth. More than a beautiful and frightening geological wonder, this cave system also preserves traces of ancient humans from over 500,000 years ago. Le Mont Brabant, Mauritius. Rising 1,824 feet above the Indian Ocean, this massive rock is not only a towering natural fortress, but also an unbreakable symbol of the human desire for freedom. Its rugged and almost isolated terrain once made it a final refuge for many enslaved people who escaped during the 18th and 19th centuries. Connected to that painful history is a legend from 1835 when many people jumped into the sea because they thought soldiers had come to capture them, although the visitors were actually bringing news that slavery had been abolished. Beyond its historical meaning, this place is also famous for the underwater waterfall illusion, created when sand and mud are pulled by ocean currents into deep water, making the sea look as if it is falling into an abyss. Recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site, this mountain has become powerful proof that even when people can be imprisoned, the desire for freedom can never be destroyed. Yangshuo, China. Yangshuo feels like the memory of an ancient ocean rising into mountains, where more than 20,000 limestone towers stand among rivers, fields, and mist like a giant ink painting. More than 200 million years ago, this rock still lay under the sea. Then tectonic forces lifted it up, so rain and underground water could slowly carve karst peaks, caves, and vertical cliffs. Because the stone towers grow so densely, they trap moisture in the valleys, letting mist hang around the mountains and making the landscape move between reality and dream. Beneath that scene, rice fields, water buffalo, old roofs, and a cormorant fishing tradition over 1,300 years old show that people here do not separate from nature, but live slowly with the rhythm of rivers and mountains. When still water reflects both sky and cliffs, A bamboo raft seems to travel between two layers of space, turning Yangshuo into a place where geology, culture, and poetry merge into one living image. Lake Garda, Italy. Lake Garda feels like a giant blue hollow left by glaciers below the Alps, covering 143 square miles and reaching 1,135 feet deep, enough to hold the largest body of fresh water in Italy. That deep funnel-shaped basin does not only store water, but also works like a natural climate machine, making the lakeside warmer than the colder mountain areas around it. Because of this, palms, lemon groves, and sun-loving plants still grow beneath snowy peaks and grey cliffs, creating a rare contrast between alpine climate and Mediterranean color. Every day, cold northern wind strikes the water in the morning. Then warmer southern wind returns in the afternoon, turning the lake into a changing stage between wild force and calm beauty. That is why the Roman ruins, stone fortresses, lemon houses, and roads cut into cliffs are not simply beside a beautiful view, but on a border where glaciers, wind, water, and human life shaped history together. Lucerne, Switzerland. Like a fairy tale painting reflected on jade green water, this city rests between a glacial lake 702 feet deep and limestone mountains nearly 6,890 feet high. The lake was shaped by ancient glacier erosion, so its clear water changes color with the light and sometimes becomes a perfect mirror for the Alps. Pure meltwater from the mountains helps keep the city unusually fresh, and water from public fountains can be drunk directly. In this setting, covered wooden bridges from the 14th century, roof paintings, old watchtowers, and fresco-covered housefronts turn the city into an open museum of the Middle Ages. When sunset paints the mountain peaks pink and red, the soft sound of water beside a steamship and white swans on the river make Lucerne one of Switzerland's most romantic corners. Katmai National Park, United States. From a once proud mountain peak, This place now opens like a giant collapse, where a 2-mile basin holds a lake nearly 800 feet deep and blue like jade. After the powerful eruption of the early 20th century, ash reached the stratosphere and made skies across the northern hemisphere glow red for months at sunset. Groundwater met hot ash and once created tens of thousands of steam columns rising up to 500 feet, leaving deep cracks like a planet cooling after fire. In this wild land, brown bears can weigh more than 1,000 pounds, standing in bright water as they wait for salmon under the morning light. With no road connection, people must arrive by seaplane, as if nature wants Katmai to remain a kingdom only open to those with real patience. Lavaux Vineyard Terraces, Switzerland. Like a mountainside stitched together with stone, this place carries vineyard terraces for more than 19 miles as they slide down toward jade-colored water. What makes it special is that the vines do not live only on direct sunlight, but also receive reflected light from a lake about 224 square miles wide and warmth stored inside stone walls. Because the soil is only about 12 to 20 inches deep over limestone, the roots must push into rock cracks to find water and minerals, giving the wine a very distinct character. Since the 11th century, monks turned steep hillsides into terraces, while the lake, more than 1,017 feet deep below, helps soften summer heat and protect against early spring frost. That is why every autumn, when vine leaves turn yellow, orange, and deep red, Lavaux looks not only like a fire beside the lake, but also like a 1,000-year trace of human labor and climate working as one. Berchtesgaden National Park, Germany. Hidden deep in the harsh Alps, this place is striking because of its giant limestone walls rising straight into the sky, creating a beauty that feels both majestic and cold. Below those high and dangerous cliffs, emerald lakes lie quietly in the valley, making the landscape feel strongly contrasted but deeply captivating. The largest central lake reaches a maximum depth of about 630 feet, stays cold all year, and is so clean that it is considered safe enough to drink directly. When thick clouds and mist flow down from the cliffs, the whole area feels separated from the outside world, becoming mysterious and isolated among the mountains and forests. This rugged and hard-to-reach terrain once made the highest mountain area here a fortified hideout for the elite of an infamous dictatorship during World War II. Pasu Konas, Pakistan. In the cold Karakoram, sharp stone peaks tear into the sky like giant fangs, revealing a massive geological scar shaped by violent movements of Earth's crust. Rising up to 20,033 feet, the cliffs are so steep that snow can hardly stay on them, exposing haunting ochre, dark grey, and rusty rock. When the last sunlight hits the rough surface, the whole mountain range seems to turn bright red, changing the horizon into a giant wall of fire around the valley. Below these sky-piercing mountains was once a dangerous section of the ancient Silk Road, where many traders and camel caravans faced snowstorms, icefalls, and deep cliffs. To see this fierce beauty, visitors must cross fragile hanging bridges, where loose wooden planks swing above a fast, muddy river. Dalmatian Coast, Croatia. The Dalmatian coast feels like a white stone wall lifted from the sea, where the collision of tectonic plates helped create a coastline about 497 miles long beside the deep blue Adriatic. Over millions of years, rainwater dissolved the limestone, carving underground caves, sinkholes, and karst cliffs rising more than 5,577 feet beside the sea. Because the seabed is mostly white pebbles and limestone, instead of muddy sand, the water is so clear that you can see nearly 164 feet below the surface. Against this natural setting, old towns, fortresses, and stone walls were built from the same white limestone of the region, turning the coast into a border fought over by empires for centuries. When the winter Bora wind clears the sky and sunset paints the cliffs pink and orange, Dalmatia becomes not only a beautiful coast, but a place where geology, war, and Mediterranean memory all leave their mark. Spiti Valley, India. Hidden in the giant Himalayas, this valley appears like a freezing desert with the rusty look of Mars, showing how icy winds have harshly carved the surface of Earth. Because mountains over 19,700 feet high block the wet clouds, this valley gets less than 7 inches of rain each year, so the land stays bare and has very little green life. In that empty and harsh landscape, white monasteries with red roofs still cling to cliff edges, looking like silent fortresses floating in the sky. The temperature range here is extreme, with winter dropping to -22 degrees Fahrenheit and freezing every stream, while summer at 86 degrees Fahrenheit can still burn skin because UV rays pass through the thin air. With narrow roads running along deep cliffs and settlements standing above 14,400 feet, Spiti Valley becomes one of the clearest examples of how humans survive in extreme nature. Ilulissat Icefjord, Greenland. In this harsh, frozen world, Ilulissat Icefjord feels like a giant ice factory, where the inland ice sheet keeps breaking apart and pushing billions of tons of ice into the ocean each year. On the water, icebergs more than 328 feet high drift like blue-white towers, but the visible part is only a small piece of the huge body hidden deep below. The scenery may look silent, but it is often torn apart by cracking ice, thunder like collapses, and powerful waves rising after giant blocks fall into the sea. Many icebergs have a deep blue color because the ice has been compressed for thousands of years, forcing most of the air inside to disappear and making the ice clearer, as if it were glowing on the sea. Each year, this ice fjord releases about 8 to 11 cubic miles of ice, and many scientists believe the iceberg that sank the Titanic was born from this violent, frozen region. Azores Islands, Portugal. Rising from the North Atlantic, this archipelago feels like a green volcanic paradise, where the deep sea and underground heat create an important shelter for whales. The strangest and most overwhelming features here are giant volcanic basins several miles wide, like scars left after eruptions collapsed entire mountains. Just beneath the lush green grass, Earth still seems to growl as white steam keeps rising from cracks and reminds us that volcanic heat is still alive. The coast here does not have long, white sand beaches, but steep black rock walls, hundreds of feet high, constantly torn by huge Atlantic waves day and night. Once a harsh whaling center in the 19th century, this archipelago has turned toward conservation, changing old whale hunting lookout points into places that protect the giants of the ocean. Fiordo di Furore, Italy. This place feels like a deep crack where sea and mountain collide, trapping the sound of waves and wind inside the cliffs until the whole gorge seems to roar with fury. That narrow and deep structure creates a separate world at the bottom, where cold mountain water meets warm sea water, while rock shade keeps the air cool and cut off from the Mediterranean summer. Because the stone beach and old fishing houses are hidden from offshore view, this place once became a natural shelter for fishermen during centuries of danger at sea. Later, an arched bridge about 98 feet high was placed across the two rock walls, carrying the road above, while the houses carved into stone remained quiet below, like bird nests in the gorge. At noon, when rare sunlight falls straight into the narrow crack, the dark water turns turquoise, proving that its beauty comes from isolation, sound, and light, not from luxury. German Channel, Palau. Torn open by tons of explosives in 1909, this man, made scar over 3,280 feet long, was cut through ancient coral reefs as a shortcut for mineral ships. But the narrow channel turns this place into a giant funnel, forcing ocean currents to stir up the seafloor into a plankton snowstorm and create an endless food source. Thanks to that rich food source, this place becomes a hunting ground for reef sharks, giant manta rays, and countless schools of fish, often called the center of the Amazon rainforest under the sea. To protect this rich marine world, every visitor must sign an ecological pledge in their passport and take responsibility if they harm nature. From a brutal past shaped by the greed for minerals, this wonder has now become powerful proof of the ocean's great ability to recover itself. Lagunas de Montebello National Park, Mexico. In the wet forests of southern Mexico, this place appears like a maze filled with lakes of magical colors. It has nearly 60 lakes connected by complex underground tunnels, forming a mysterious water system hidden deep beneath the limestone plateau. The most overwhelming thing is that lakes sitting close together can still show different colors, from turquoise and deep blue to emerald, because depth, minerals, and sunlight keep changing. Under the ground, water is still wearing away the limestone, causing some areas to collapse and form water pits more than 131 feet deep. When rainforest, ferns, and trees gripping the rock walls reflect on the still lake surface, this place feels like a world forgotten by time. Keukenhof, Netherlands. Waking for only 8 weeks each spring, this 79-acre garden appears like a giant velvet carpet where red, yellow, orange, and purple flower bands weave into one another. Few people know that this splendid landscape was not first made for art, but began as a kitchen garden in the 15th century, growing herbs and vegetables for noble meals. In 1949, 20 leading flower exporters turned the garden into a huge outdoor stage to show the power of the Dutch flower industry to the world. Even with its massive scale, all 7 million bulbs are still planted by hand by exactly 40 gardeners over 3 autumn months, using traditional tools. The luxury of millions of flowers here also recalls the tulip fever of the 17th century, when one striped bulb could once be worth as much as a fine mansion. Gegeti Trinity Church, Georgia. On a mountainside nearly 7,120 feet high, this church is not placed only to be seen, but where people must look upward as if searching for support between sky and stone. Since the 14th century, carrying heavy volcanic stones up the slope by human strength and pack horses has made this building proof of medieval endurance and faith. Its position near the mountain edge forces the church to face winds that can reach 50 miles per hour, while the snowy mountain over 16,581 feet behind it makes the landscape feel colder and more sacred. That is why the architecture here does not need luxury, only a separate bell tower, grey stone walls, narrow shafts of light, and fading frescoes to create a deep silence. During the short, warm months, snow pulls back from the hillside, and mountain grass with wildflowers grows around the cold stone base, reminding us that this place survives not by fighting nature, but by learning to live with it. Isle of Skye, Scotland. It feels like another planet left behind in the ocean, where nature is not polished smooth, but shows its power through wild, rocky landforms. This is not a softly peaceful land, because wind, rain, and the sea keep striking the rock surface, creating strange and rough formations. Because of its complex terrain, the weather here can change like 4 seasons in 1 hour, with average annual rainfall reaching more than 80 inches. When strong ocean winds blow upward along the cliffs, waterfalls can be pushed back into the air, creating a surreal scene where water seems to flow upward. Offshore, cliffs more than 1,000 feet high drop straight into the sea, where powerful waves smash against the rock base and throw up giant white columns of foam. Lake Bled, Slovenia. Like an emerald from a fairy tale, Lake Bled is enchanting with clear water, a small island, an old church, and snowy mountains all around it. The lake sits at 1,558 feet above sea level, covers about 0.56 square miles, and reaches a depth of up to 100 feet, making it peaceful yet surprisingly deep. On the small island in the middle of the lake, the old church is linked to a legendary wishing bell, and legend says that if someone rings it 3 times with a sincere heart, their wish will come true. To reach the island, visitors still ride handmade wooden boats built in a tradition that is hundreds of years old, with rowing skills passed down only within certain families. On the cliff beside the lake, the castle dates back to the year 1011 and was once home to powerful bishops, adding ancient depth to the beauty of this place. Fiordland National Park, New Zealand. This place has unbelievably steep terrain, where sky-high granite cliffs drop straight into deep black water, and sunlight almost never reaches the bottom. Over millions of years, glaciers carved deep into the hard rock, creating fjords that can reach about 1,312 feet deep and making the whole landscape feel overwhelming. With annual rainfall reaching up to 276 inches, Fiordland National Park is often covered in mist, and after each rain, thousands of waterfalls pour straight from the cliffs into the fjord. This endless rain creates a layer of fresh water over the salty surface, blocking sunlight from passing through and making the fjord look black like ink. Around that dark, deep water, dense temperate rainforest spreads across the land, with ancient ferns and green moss covering the rocks, making the whole area look from afar like it is wearing a quiet, green velvet coat.